This is the Red Podcast.
This is episode number 125. How do you know if your idea is any good? How do you evaluate a business idea so you don't lose your shirt on it? That's what we're talking about on this episode.
This is the Red Podcast. Real entrepreneur development. Make more money, work less, and live a life of freedom. No BS advice that really works. Here's your hosts, David Hooper and Laurel Staples.
The Time magazine. Does anybody still read Time?
I don't know. Apparently my mother.
And does anybody still read magazines? That's the bigger question.
I totally do.
Like what?
Like More magazine.
More?
And Entrepreneur
Okay.
and Success.
Okay.
All those.
All right. Okay.
Okay, so I've disproven your point.
Well, yeah, maybe. So you read 3 magazines and you actually read them. You don't just subscribe to them. Because I subscribe to a lot of magazines.
Yeah, they're all over your office floor. Hanging out, just waiting to be picked up and read.
I got my men's magazines. I got my women's magazines. That's how I stay in touch with an audience. And it used to be when I was single, before you were around, I'd have a workman come over and he'd look at all these women's magazines, like Red Book, Cosmo, and he'd say, "Oh, you married?" And I'd say, "Nope." And then they'd kind of give me that weird look.
Maybe you had like an invisible girlfriend. And
Probably
you're
what
just-
he was thinking.
You're just trying to use the law of attraction to bring this girl in and
Yeah.
all of that.
Yeah, or I'm just renting by the hour. Who knows? There's so many options.
Who knows?
So Time Magazine, I've got it right here in front of me. Real paper magazine, the Genius issue. And this has an article called The 25 Best Inventions of 2014. They've gone through hundreds of inventions, maybe millions of inventions, and they've found the 25 best. No reason for you to look any further. We're going to be talking about some of those here on this episode of Red Podcast. What is RED? RED stands for Real Entrepreneur Development. We help you build an audience, sell more products, and make more money. We are business optimizers who show you how to be more efficient in your marketing, finding the hidden money sitting right in front of you. Sometimes that's with an invention, although I'm not an inventor. Have you ever invented anything?
Oh, I'm sure I have. I once made an entire pool table out of construction paper and matchsticks.
I don't think that's an invention. That's
Oh,
more
well,
like
it was
an
pretty cool.
art project. That's like Pinterest.
I invented a mini pool table. It was not very level. Anyway, but we're talking about inventions, and a bigger sense of the word is, how do you know if your idea or your invention is any good? And this is really going to look at how to evaluate a business idea, because sometimes you come up with an idea that sounds kind of crazy, and it might be kind of crazy, but it might be a great idea, and it might be something you just want to throw away. So how do you figure that out?
I want to throw something out before we get into the nitty-gritty of how to evaluate a business idea. And this kind of bites the whole show in the ass, which is the only way to really know for sure if your idea is any good is to test it.
I think a lot of the ideas that we're going to be talking about today, the inventions, the best inventions of 2014, are ideas I would have shot down if my friend had come to me and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this." I would have been like, that's a terrible idea. So you just don't know until you try it.
You had a crowdfunding experience to test one of your ideas a few months ago. Any of the inventions of the year, were they crowdfunded?
They were. Yeah, quite a few were crowdfunded. One of them, they talked about the coolest cooler, which I think we've mentioned before, which was the best, most funded Kickstarter campaign of all time, raising about 13 million.
It was, but they have since...
Have they surpassed it now?
Well, you know what? I take that back. They might have had more. The Oatmeal just did a thing on Kickstarter. I think they had, was it 9 million? Maybe it's $9 million, but they had 200,000 people that submitted pledges for it.
Wow.
We don't know. Don't listen to any of these numbers.
The great thing about crowdfunding, and that goes back to the first way to evaluate your business idea, your invention idea, your product idea, is to test it. Crowdfunding is a great way to test your idea, to see before you put all this time and money and energy into it, are people interested in having it?
All right. So of the best 25, give me an example of one that was crowdfunded.
One that was crowdfunded was action figures that empower girls. They're these different colorful action figures of women.
Like Barbies?
No, they're just like action figures. Kind of envision X-Men, the women in X-Men kind of things. That's what it looks like. And they've raised almost $163,000 on Kickstarter to put together this series of action figures. It's I Am Elemental. So it's iamelemental.com. You can see these action figures. So when two moms came together, they were searching for female action figures that were athletic and empowering. And most of what they were finding for their kids were Barbie dolls or something like that, or they were hyper-sexualized figures for adult male collectors and all these things that they didn't want to buy their kids. So they came together and designed these, and the people on Kickstarter liked them. So that's a great way to test your idea that you have in your head, is take it to a crowdfunding platform.
You and I worked for a restaurant, or they hired us to do some consulting. And what he did was a soft launch. That's another great way to test. Before he was fully open, before he'd stocked everything, gotten the liquor license, he had people testing his food, was testing the location, and that's how he knew that he was going to go with the menu that he did, the name of the store, what the thing was decorated like. Just tested out some ideas to see if people would respond to it.
Also, we've talked on here about having a minimum viable product. That's from the Lean Startup book, and that's an idea as well, is put out some smaller or small scale version of what you're doing and see if people catch on and if people like it. I was reading the book Rejection Proof, which is the guy that you interviewed on Red Podcast a couple weeks ago.
We did. redpodcast.com/103. Jia Jung is his name. And what he did was purposely get rejected for 100 days in a row. We told his story on that episode, but he fits into this story too.
Well, he is amazing, and I love his book. I don't know if it's out yet, but it's coming out soon. It's called Rejection Proof, and I was going through it, and one of his big stories was that, you know those tennis shoes that have wheels on the bottom of them for kids?
I've seen kids skating around. It looks like a single wheel maybe on their heel.
Yeah, it's like 1 minute they're walking through the mall or whatever, wherever you see those kids, and the next minute they're kind of skating on their heels. So Jia Jung came up with a drawing of this, the idea for this, and he showed it to his uncle. And he says, this is my idea, is like to put a wheel in a tennis shoe, and he had sketches, and he had really mapped out his idea. And his uncle, who he really respected, said, no, that's a silly idea. He was in college at the time. He said, you should be focusing on your studies. You should be making good grades. And so he took the idea of these wheelie shoes and put them in a drawer. And a couple years later, of course, they came out and kids were going nuts for them. I believe the company is called Healy. And they were valued, I don't know if it was recently or a couple years ago, but in the book he said they were valued at about $1 billion. So something that someone told him was a terrible idea, if he had tested it, he might have found that it was actually a good idea and it actually caught on. And that's what Healy did, is they tested it.
Well, if he had tested it, or to take that further, if he could have gotten some kind of intellectual property protection, trademark, copyright, patent on it, even if Healy had had the success, he would have still owned the intellectual property. Because just to say that somebody else had success with something eventually doesn't mean that you would have done that. We've talked about that here before. It takes more than just a good idea to make something happen, but owning that intellectual property is very important. So if you do have a good idea and you think it's going to go somewhere, make sure you do what you can to legally protect yourself.
And that's what he said in the book, is he doesn't know if his would have been as successful and if he could have done it in the right way, but it does show that if you think something's a good idea, don't just put it in a drawer. Put it out there. See if other people think it's a good idea. And you don't have to do a full launch of it to figure that out.
One of the reasons that you want to test your idea is to find out if there's a market for it. But before you even get to the testing phase, some of the things that you can do to find out if there is a market for it is to look and see if you've got competition. If you don't look to see if there was competition, sometimes people will try something, and the reason it doesn't exist now is because there is no market for the idea. A question to ask yourself, will people pay for it? In testing, a lot of times what people will do is give something away, and that's completely different from actually getting somebody to reach into their wallet, reach into the pocketbook, pull out a credit card, and charge it.
Do people still call wallets pocketbooks?
No, pocketbook is like a purse.
Oh.
You never
That's
heard that?
No, that's what my grandmother would say. So I was just wondering.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah,
I'm probably about as old as your
You're
grandmother.
like old school there. There's an invention in time in this article that's the chip that stops your slouching. Now, I don't know if
The
someone...
chip. What does that mean? Like a computer chip?
This is what it says. It says, once users clip the Lumo Lift, it's called Lumo Lift, a chip-like gadget about the size of a thumb, kind of like a Fitbit, I'm imagining, onto their shirt, it analyzes neck and spinal positions and vibrates when they're less than ideal. So mine would probably be vibrating right about now.
Well, that might be a good thing. That could be a whole nother market for this thing. Somebody with bad posture and vibrates all the time.
Yeah. That's a different market,
That's
David.
a different market, yeah.
Thank you.
But the same patent would apply.
Same patent might apply there. Well, this is something that, as far as I know, a product like this is not on the market. So you would have to figure out, is there a market for it? You can't look out there and say, hey, this already exists. We're going to do it better or cheaper or faster. And people are already buying it. You have to figure out if people want to buy it in the first place.
I'm curious to know what the benefits of something like this are. I will tell you this. As somebody that does yoga, which is me,
Okay.
I go to the chiropractor every couple of weeks for an adjustment. I would say that I'm probably the target market for this. With better posture, with spinal health, you can have a lot more comfortable life. You can do a lot more. I think there's something to this, but are people going to clip a chip onto their shirt or whatever you do with this thing? I don't know, because this actually takes work.
It does. Well, it's a reminder. It's a constant reminder. It says half of the users are women, which is impressive given that early adopters for gadgets often tilt towards men. So it's $100. So you could try it out.
One of the things I would wonder about this thing is, does it solve a problem? Do people actually care? And certainly if you've got back pain, people are going to care.
It's for people with back pain, so that would be a market. I think there's a huge market for that. But are people going to do something like this to solve it, as opposed to get the right mattress or get the right chair? I don't know.
When you looked at some of these inventions, did you wonder, hey, what problem does this solve?
Some of them, yeah. Like the action figures. I don't know. I mean, I guess that solves a problem for girls, but I didn't have a problem growing up, so.
It solves a hole in the market, maybe, if girls are into action figures.
Sure. And I had action figures. Maybe they were just designed for boys, but I didn't care. I was a kid. Didn't matter. Another one of the inventions that Time magazine lists, it's the prison room that helps inmates relax. Have you heard of this?
Having worked in prisons and volunteered and gone into lead groups of prisoners, I can tell you that is a huge issue within prisons. It's actually an issue outside of prisons. People never, ever relax. But these guys, it was amazing to me that you're talking 24/7. They were never relaxed. They were always worried about somebody shanking them or something.
Well, this is called the Blue Room, and it says for 23 hours a day, the 200 inmates in a solitary confinement at Oregon's largest prison see nothing but a tiny white-walled cell. An experience some researchers suggest can heighten mental illness and make prisoners prone to suicide attempts and violence. So last year, officials began letting some of them spend their free hour in a first-of-its-kind Blue Room, which was an exercise space where a projector plays video of open deserts, streaming waterfalls, and other outdoor scenery. So that seems like an interesting idea. And apparently it's working because they say they've responded so well to the Blue Room that they actually use it. They use time in it to preempt bad behavior.
I think this thing would have some legs, knowing what I know about the prison system, if you could show people, and that includes the public, that it saves money. Now, a lot of times people come down very hard on prisoners. Music programs have been removed from prisons. People don't want to think that prisoners are having a good time. But the reality is, especially if you're in something like these prisoners are, solitary confinement, it is no picnic. So I think this is great. And I think it could help reduce cost with less fighting, less issues, less court cost, less administrative things. So to me, this could be a winner.
The point is that they're testing it on a smaller audience. They're testing it in one facility, and they're finding out if there is a market for it, and they can build from there. Another product that I wonder if there is a market for, and I'm guessing there is because they're going forward with it, according to this article in Time magazine, is called Ringly. What Ringly does is it's this ring that you wear on your finger that lights up when you get important messages on your smartphone. So if you get a message from your boss or a text from your kid, or if your Lyft or Uber driver is trying to get a hold of you, this ring you're wearing will light up. So you don't have to constantly check your phone all the time.
Does that solve a problem? Because I think people like to check their phones.
I think people have a phone addiction, so I don't know who's trying to go away from that. That would be something I might be interested in, because I don't want to be hunched over my phone all the time, because then my Lumo lift will just ignite and start vibrating. So
I wonder how long some of these inventions are going to last, because I've seen a lot of inventions come, and it's more like a craze or a fad. For example, I knew a guy who made a lot of money during the SARS epidemic. Remember SARS?
I do.
Everybody's wearing this mask, and this guy's selling the hell out of these masks. But these days, not so much. We're not worried about SARS. We're into Ebola, whatever the disease of the month is. Something like Ringly, is it going to be something that can stand the test of time? Are we going to want to hold our phones in the next couple of years? I don't know. I wonder about that. I also wonder about the cost of it. You know, that's another thing to ask yourself when you come up with an invention. Do the numbers work? Sometimes something might not work now, but it will work in the future. One of those things that's gotten cheaper and cheaper, Ford, he was losing money on every single car, but as the assembly line process got more innovative, as more people wanted Fords, he was able to make money from scaling it up. YouTube is the same way. YouTube, they lost a lot of money on that in the beginning. These days, transfer, disk space, fast internet, that's enabled this thing to work. And it wouldn't have worked where we were, but they saw the future.
The hoverboard is an invention that they talk about in Time magazine, and that's something that, will the numbers work? I'm not sure. The hoverboard costs $10,000.
Okay, that's not going to work right now.
Probably not going to work, especially since it's an actual hoverboard, but kind of two problems with it that I'm seeing right off the bat are that it only works if you're on top of a conductive surface, so it's not going to work otherwise. And the battery lasts for 15 minutes, so you're not going to get very far on your conductive surface. But they raised $450,000 on Kickstarter.
And that's one of the things. It's a proof of concept. As technology gets better, the battery life will improve. Maybe they'll figure out to use your hoverboard on carpet or something that's not conductive. So that's something that could work.
Would you get a hoverboard, David?
No. What does a hoverboard cost? You said $10,000?
$10,000 for a hoverboard.
No, not worth it. If I'm going to spend $10,000, it better have 4 wheels and an engine.
I hope the battery's rechargeable. 15 minutes, your $10,000 hoverboard is dead.
What about USP? A lot of people talk about USP, which stands for unique selling proposition. Sometimes, to me, USP can be something very, very simple, such as better service.
Also, it can be the features that you take away. This is what happened with another invention called the Black Phone. I hadn't heard of the Black Phone before this article, but it's an Android phone. It costs $629, and it's designed to put privacy above everything else. So they stripped an Android phone basically of all the features that might make data vulnerable, like a calendar sync. I don't know how I'd live without my calendar sync, and they've just kind of made this thing encrypt calls and text and browsing history and just made it a privacy phone.
So I can't do like the Find My iPhone feature on this.
I don't think so.
They're not going to let you know where you are.
No.
That makes sense to me. I
Well,
like
there
that.
you
You
go.
take a picture, it's got the GPS info on it. I wouldn't mind that being stripped down sometime.
Well, if you're like a secret spy, you definitely need the Black Phone, but you have to look at how is important your unique selling proposition when you look at, is your business idea or your invention idea any good? Because there are tons and tons of phones on the market. So if you're making a phone, how can you make it different enough?
I think some of the biggest things to ask yourself if you're doing an invention are the personal questions, such as, do you have the passion to make this work? Do you have the knowledge to make this work? Also, how are you going to explain this to people? Right now, of course, we're not the inventors. I don't know that we're doing a very good job of explaining these inventions. And these are the 25 best inventions, according to Time magazine. You got to get pretty good at explaining what you do if you want to sell a lot of your stuff.
And you have to explain what the value is that you offer through what you do. And that's where a lot of business owners fall short, I think.
The coolest cooler. I think the reason that thing made so much money on Kickstarter was a video that showed it in use. That's one way that you can explain what you do. Because basically it's just a cooler. It's one of those plastic igloo things. Everybody got them. But this thing has a blender on it. It's got big speakers that connect to your iPhone via Bluetooth. And when you see people actually using it at a tailgating kind of situation, you think, oh, yeah, I could use that. But if I were to tell you, yeah, it's a cooler with speakers, it doesn't sound very exciting.
It's true. And I'm glad that you said, do you have a passion to make it work? Because that's really critical. I read an article on the coolest cooler, and he launched that campaign twice. He launched the first campaign probably about 6 months to a year before the one that went viral, and he raised $13 million. But he launched that first one, didn't take off. He didn't raise the money that he wanted to raise. And he took a step back and reevaluated and redid the campaign and launched it again and became the most successful Kickstarter campaign out there. If he didn't have the passion and the vision to make it work, he wouldn't have relaunched it. He would have just been like, oh, people don't like it. He tested it, people didn't like it, and then he went back to the drawing board, fixed some things, and then went back and did it.
Sometimes that belief is what makes your creation a success. Funny music business story. This has happened more than a few times. Songs get on albums because they are pitched from songwriters to artists. That's the simplistic version of that. I know guys that have pitched a song, been turned down. 6 months later, go pitch the same song. It gets cut, then it becomes a hit. Same song, same exact demo, then it becomes a hit. Doesn't happen all the time, but I think having that belief is important.
Got to believe in it.
If you have questions or comments, feel free to reach out to us. You can do that at redpodcast.com. There you will find past episodes, including the one with Jia Zheng about 100 days of rejection therapy. Redpodcast.com/103 for that one. We've also got an app now. It's in the Apple Store, Amazon App Store, and the Google Play App Store. Just search for Real Entrepreneur Development. You will find it there. You'll get all the past episodes, and the app is free. While you're there, we'd appreciate if you would leave a review. That will help us to come up more often in search engines, help more people find us, and help us to build the Real Entrepreneur Development community. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.
What is RED? RED stands for Real Entrepreneur Development. We help you build an audience, sell more products. What is RED?